There's a lot of confusion and misinformation about 529s out there too. A lot of people think, for instance, you have to go with your state plan, and that you have to maybe use it for your state school. Not the case. It's really a retirement plan for your kid's future or even your own future.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Office Hours, where we explore the key trends impacting higher ed and what those trends mean for students and families. Today I sat down with Jordan Lee. Jordan's the CEO of Backer and Saving for College, two companies in the 529 space. So if you've ever had questions about 529 plans, why they matter, you're in the right place. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, I'm Will Geiger, co-founder of Scholarships 360, and I'm really excited to be joined here today by Jordan Lee. Jordan is a real expert in the area of 529s. He's the CEO of Saving for College, as well as the CEO and founder of the edtech fintech company Backer. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I wanted to kick things off today, Jordan, with a question about it's kind of the myths and misconceptions about paying for college. And I'm curious, what do you think a common thing that students and parents get wrong or might misunderstand about paying for college?
Our lens is really about how you save the right amount to be able to afford college well without getting a ton of student loans that cost a lot and takes a long time for you to pay off in most cases. So, viewed from that kind of vantage point, I think the main problem families encounter is just analysis paralysis. When they look at their savings options and 529s in particular, there are so many options. There's a lot of kind of anxiety. They don't want to make the wrong choice. And so as a result of that, suddenly years have gone by. They haven't made a decision. They haven't opened an account. And all of that time, is really valuable. The time value of money there. You could have had growth in contributions to the account, both from yourself, but also if you invited family and relatives, grandparents, uncles, aunts, really anyone who cares about your kid to contribute, that can be a multiplier on your savings. And so I think that's the main problem. And I kind of like this framework that Jeff Bezos of Amazon uses, which all decisions are sort of one-way doors or two-way doors. And for a one-way decision, you'd better be right. You should do all the analysis, be very, very sure, because it's very hard to reverse. But for a two-way door, you're much better off just making a decision, acting, starting the process. And 529s are that way. If you're not happy with the plan that you opened because the performance isn't what you hoped for, or the website you have to use to manage it is a little too janky and confusing, and you don't actually use it much, or really anything, you can always roll over to a different plan. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but 529s are increasingly flexible with recent legislative changes. So you're also in a pretty good situation just having assets in a 529 because you can use it for an increasing number of different types of expenses for different people. So I would say that's the main problem, just kind of overthinking the initial decision. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it occurs to me just I think education is a complicated thing to pay for, but I think, it doesn't, I think in some ways it's not rocket science, and it's just making some very smart, basic decisions. I know on my end, thinking about advising seniors, it's like, apply for financial aid through the FAFSA, complete that, apply for outside scholarships, college merit scholarships if the schools you're looking at have merit aid, appealing for financial aid if you're unhappy with your PIT package, but it's not necessarily a really complicated decision. Beyond that, one other thing, just a reminder for everyone that sometimes employers might be able to also contribute to 529 plans. And that was the case with my wife's employer, which just can be another important source of income, for accelerating that growth.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely been more activity with more employers kind of considering 529 as a benefit. I think it still hasn't broken out and become quite as common as, a retirement benefit, or some of the student loan kind of pay down benefits are really interesting and gaining some traction. But it's always really cool when you see an employer being proactive about it, helping their employees set it up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I I think I mentioned this in our last conversation. I'm a new dad, so thinking about saving for college already. What for other, folks who might be new to saving for college, can you just, kind of the quick like overview of what a 529 plan is, and just like why it's such a great starting point? I think sometimes you've heard that, this is a thing that you should do, but you don't know exactly like what it is or what it might be similar to.
Yeah, and that's a big problem because there's a lot of confusion and misinformation about 529s out there too. A lot of people think, for instance, you have to go with your state plan, and that you have to maybe use it for your state school. Not the case. When I try to explain them, it's really a retirement plan for your kids' future or even your own future. And future, can be defined as your education, their education, or even their career or your career. And so it works like a Roth IRA in structure. So you put in money post tax, and then it grows tax free. And then those withdrawals that you ultimately take once it's hopefully grown by a lot can be used to pay for pretty much anything associated with your education and career at this point. So, a lot of families get started just saving in a regular bank account, which is great because you got to start somewhere. But if you look at the interest paid by the average bank account in the country, it's, let's just say, de minimis. It doesn't really, let you keep up with inflation, let alone the cost of college, which unfortunately has been increasing over the decades. So with a 529, you put the money in, it grows tax free, and you can ultimately outpace inflation and really make a real big dent out of the cost of college. And whatever you don't save, of course, you should use a platform like Scholarships 360 to figure out how to fill in the gaps and make sure that you're not going to end up with too much student loan debt.
Yeah, and I think that's a great reminder for everyone. That's other educational expenses, and even families can use it to pay for private high schools and K through 12. That's correct, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, this year actually there was a huge development with the HR1, the one big beautiful bill, as it's called. So it used to be that you could use 529s only for private school tuition and only 10K per year per beneficiary. So relatively narrow, but some families were using it for that purpose. As of this legislation, you can actually use a 529 for many more K 12 expenses. And starting in January, you're going to be able to use 20K per year, not 10K per year on those expenses. So, yeah, if you want, I can kind of go into a few more of the new changes from that
Yeah,
legislation.
that would be great. I know that's been another kind of interesting, like, part of this conversation is just how this new legislation has really impacted paying for college and specifically 529 plans, I think, in a really positive way.
Yeah, it's kind of a watershed moment. Kind of turning a 529 into a full cradle to career lifelong learning account, that can support a person through really every stage of their education and vocation. For K-12, I talked a little bit about, the expanded tuition use, but you can actually also use it now for online tutoring, for test prep, for test fees like SAT, ACT, making it, I think, a no-brainer for most families that are going to have these expenses. But then there are two other kind of big changes that happened this year. The first is much stronger support for alternative pathways. So let's say your kid is not going to go to a traditional four-year college. There was already some kind of flexibility baked into a 529 added a few years ago, where if your kid doesn't go to college, you could actually roll over a sizable amount, up to 35K, into a Roth IRA for them. To kick off their retirement account with kind of a bang. But then this legislation expanded it further. So you can actually use the money for various credentialing programs, trade schools, pilot school, welding, HVAC, nursing. It's just a very long list of, kind of more professional oriented education experiences that a large part of the country is really interested in these days. And then
Yeah,
actually the last one I was just mentioning is even mid-career for yourself. If you wanted to use a 529 for a registered apprenticeship, that's been allowed for a few years, but this legislation expanded the list of kind of certificate programs and various other things that you can use it for. So let's say you're studying for the LSAT, or you're going to take the bar. You can pay for those fees too out of your 529.
yeah, I think really great. Just empowers, I think, families and students with a lot more options. I know my wife's case. It was just kind of a no brainer. Her employer was like, "You're just going to contribute this." To a 529. That was before we had kids, so we actually used part of it for some of the fees associated with her graduate school program, which is great. Just because it was just something that we just another source of capital to pay for that program. Um, I guess a little bit more of a macro question, Jordan. I think this is all really exciting, and I think on our end we're really eager just to share this, information and these opportunities with more students on Scholarships 360. I'm curious how you think that the 529 industry can be reaching a wider audience, particularly of parents, just who I think would be the kind of primary target for this type of opportunity.
Yeah, I think, the states that run these programs do a lot of hard work, kind of boots on the ground, trying to reach families, especially in their states. And, you sometimes have a state tax incentive, either a tax credit or a deduction to kind of encourage, to incentivize families in that state to use their plan and all of that. I think that's all great. Like, there's been a long kind of like 25-year track record now of families saving with 529s, and I think there are about 17 million accounts and over 525 billion in assets in them now. So it's a success story, but honestly, I think there's a huge vista of opportunity that hasn't been reached yet by the industry, largely because of its approach to technology. And, when I got into the space about 10 years ago, most of the programs had fairly legacy kind of online experiences that were pretty hard to use to make sense of. It's improved a little bit over the years, but it's still not where, consumer fintech, for instance, is in terms of like a standard of usability and all of the bells and whistles you get with like a modern kind of tech product that make you want to use it often and really successfully. So if I had to like summarize like what is the big opportunity for 529s, I think it is to embrace technology even in a more full-throated kind of comprehensive way. Um, like, so many consumers out there are using apps like Acorns or Chime or Robinhood and so on, sometimes as their primary banking interface. Can you get a 529 through any of them? No. Can you connect your 529? Can you, direct some of the contributions you have on that platform into the 529? There's a lack of interoperability and sort of open shared data standards, the various things that you would hope for that would let 529s kind of travel more smoothly between experiences. If we could crack that, and if we could put 529 experiences right in front of consumers where they are today, then I think you'd get a lot more adoption of 529s, a lot more success in how they use it, how well they fund it, how often they're able to get friends and relatives to contribute. Are they, in the right investment portfolios? All of the sort of pain points that exist in the current interface between consumers and their plan, I think could start to get resolved if they embraced more of a integration mindset with the rest of the fintech landscape.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I even know when I've been going through this process, it's a little bit overwhelming, and every state has a different. You really pick and choose. And I think part of it's the paralysis of decision making, and then part of it is not like necessarily within your banking infrastructure, like having like an easy like go to solution. That like with your if you're a Chase customer for your banking, you're probably need a credit card and maybe a mortgage. And it just seems like a real missed opportunity, especially just thinking about how important lifelong learning, quote unquote, will, continue to be as, folks are going to be, needing to seek out, upskilling just as the, work landscape continues to change really, really quickly.
Totally agree.
Um, Your work at, I guess this could be either saving for college or back, or do you have a favorite success story of a student or family who's paid for college with a 529?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so many. I think like you get, running a business like this, you get like nice little notes in the support inbox all the time, like, a few a week of people just telling some kind of nice story about how they got some friends and relatives to contribute to their savings and they're really excited about it, or, they're less stressed about affording college and, having student loans for their kid, which in many cases, especially with our generation, these millennial parents that have had so much crippling student loan debt, um, just the feeling of being able to take action and get started on it so that their kids are less likely to have that outcome just comes through loud and clear. One that I kind of like, it's a little unique and different actually, is I was the other week, I was like on Capitol Hill just talking with some congressional offices about the recent 529 legislation. And one of the more junior members of the office, he actually is currently using his 529 to pay for like a night and weekend kind of law school degree. Sounds kind of like what you did. So you're, or your wife, like very ahead of the curve and savvy to be able to do that and think about it. But I think as 529s are evolving to meet the needs of modern consumers and the modern job market, the modern education market, I think these types of stories are going to get more and more common.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Were there any yeah, how did the what you're able to share? How did the conversations go? How were your how was it received?
Oh, it was great. This time around, I've done it a couple times. Normally you're on the hill asking for things, like you're kind of there, like pitching, and you're saying, "This is what a 529 is. This is why it's great. This is why you shouldn't, change in a negative way the structure or anything like that." But given that the new legislation just passed, this was just sort of like a happy sort of celebration moment where we were really thanking them for not messing with it and in fact improving it along all these dimensions. And everyone knew about it, so there was no sort of 101 education required this time, which is a good sign. And the last factor or kind of like observation I had that's really encouraging is, in a time of fierce partisanship and polarization in our country, 529s are really this sort of third rail thing that still is bipartisan. And, I was in Democratic office, I was in Republican office. Everyone was kind of singing from the same choir sheet, or everyone was very on board with this is a positive thing, especially now that we are um, making it more flexible to meet like the needs of students who aren't necessarily going on the same traditional pathway that it originally was designed to support.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I'm glad to hear it's that's kind of was curious just the sort of composition of folks parties you're talking to, so that's very cool. And to your point, very sadly a unique thing these days, something that everyone can kind of get behind, but it's just more money in the hands of families and folks trying to pay for their education to better themselves. And I was also very excited to see just whether it was this or Workforce Pell, just like ways to support a variety of pathways for students, which I think is just a really great thing. Just I think education, it's not a one size fits all product, and it's great that we are supporting with funding people making different types of decisions. Um, on this on this podcast, I'm always trying to encourage folks and like this the small simple things that they can do to know, better themselves, make better decisions around their educational pathway. So, curious from your perspective, are there any things that you think a family, maybe you're listening to this, you're like, yes, like I'm sold on this. What's something a family can do to act on it in the next like week or so?
I would say carve out 20 minutes. You really don't need more than that to go learn the basics. Consider setting up a plan, getting a recurring contribution set up if you're thinking ahead for your child. Because as we were describing earlier, that analysis paralysis is really the main barrier that stops families from committing and starting the process. You don't need to keep the plan forever. You can start with a really small contribution, even 10 or 20 or $25 per month can really add up to a lot if you're starting early enough when your kid is, 0 to 5 or something like that. Um, and then you'll at least start to see some gains. It's very satisfying to open something and see, oh, I've actually made money here. Investing can be a positive endorphin kind of rush type thing, especially, and it doesn't need to be the day trading kind of intensity. It can be this long term objective that you're making steady progress on. um, yeah, you in 5, 10 years will thank you today for taking that step. I've been doing this now for 10 years, and not once has anyone told me they wish they had started to save later than they did. That's literally never come up. So I would say, yeah, just get started. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great reminder that you can get started with like small amounts of money. It doesn't have to, you don't need like thousands and thousands of dollars. And just over time, that is going to compound. Which I know there's always the, personal finance analogies that's just like, a cup of coffee a week or whatever. But I think that is, there's truth to that. And, especially I think like as as if you're, a parent, just like trying to provide more options for your child. And I think one of the great reminders in this conversation is that even if like maybe they wind up getting a full ride to go to a college, or they choose to do something different, you're going to be setting them up really nicely with the retirement at the very least. So there's a lot of options. Um, to shift gears a little bit, I've heard you talk about social finance before. I'm kind of curious what this means in the context of saving for college, and if you could just share a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So you know, we describe finance, the whole category kind of as personal finance. I think that that came out of the early days of personal computing. You had a personal computer, and then Intuit and others like added some basic sort of budgeting tools and this type of thing. And it was always a very individualized experience. From the start. And even our financial infrastructure out there is not really set up for that well for kind of joint accounts and kind of a community participating around some kind of savings or investment process. So, yeah, like a concept I really like is this idea of social finance, where if you have an objective that actually does lend itself to multiple participants and maybe even a community kind of contributing and partaking, then you can get really powerful results as an individual by involving that community, by inviting them. And so that's kind of the lesson of Backer so far is we set out in the very early days to make a social savings kind of experience where if you choose to set up a 529 with Backer some of the first things you're, encouraged to do are set up a gifting page, personalize it, make it really nice, invest some time and effort in it so you feel kind of some stake in it, with a nice photo, a description, all of that. And then gently, delicately invite, your family, your friends, your community, anyone who, cares about your kid to participate. Um, certainly in my experience, I have a 2-year old, and we have birthday parties, all of that. We don't have a ton of space in our apartment. Do I need like a ton of toys at all times? She already has like what feels like infinite toys. If we just put the backer link inside the birthday party invitation, the evite, the paperless post, whatever it is, it's really kind of cool to see, people I wouldn't even expect necessarily, like giving a little gift, for that birthday. And then we have reminders. So, or when the holidays come, they might want to contribute again. If they're really close to the family, like an aunt or uncle, or certainly grandparents is a huge use case. Those folks can give larger amounts, or they can set up recurring amounts, every month, every year, on a regular schedule. And the nice thing about all that is, it creates this interesting feeling of kind of reciprocity among the receivers of all this support. Like if they're going to go set up a backer kind of gifting page for their kid, you're probably going to want to contribute. Like if you're getting 10, 15 bucks per month from, the uncle, you're probably going to want to support your nephew, your niece, with at least the same amount or whatever you can afford. And it's funny, even if it is the same exact amount, in theory, you're just like trading money and no one's coming out ahead. But it's like the social vibe and feeling of giving that is so powerful that most makes both sides really excited about it, more engaged, kind of thinking more about the savings process. So it has these sort of like positive externalities, even if your objective sort of like analysis of the money flow kind of nets out even. Uh, you end up having more engagement, more savings in the end of it. So I think like saving for education is the perfect social finance use case. But looking ahead, I think like we may have more of those over time. It's possible family might support through some kind of service like a down payment or who knows what. And I think that's an interesting path that fintech could pursue.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, yeah, there's a few thoughts on that. Definitely, you know, special to make that giving really personal. I think like the kind of operations of I know for our daughter's baptism was just a lot of like the checks and cash, which is really like sweet and generous. But nice to have. We are all of that will be for her like educational fund and everything. But just that kind of eliminates a step if it's through a platform like that, which that makes everything really easy. And right there with you, we have a very small house, so do not I've underappreciated how how much stuff babies and kids can have. And I think it's a constant battle trying to declutter.
Yeah, I don't want to deny them, but I also want to keep it, somewhat within reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting about some of the other use cases. Just reading a story the other day about, for like millennials and some Gen Z folks, just increase of family helping with like down payments on homes or cars. And yeah, just that if there's a way of like making that like easy and, tapping into, other, potential people in your network, that makes a ton of sense. Um, so I guess zooming out, Jordan, a little bit, I think it's a really interesting time in both higher ed and K through 12 education. I think um, you know, AI is obviously like we're still such early days of like that really leaving an imprint or maybe changing things completely. On the college front, we're seeing a lot of colleges close. Just a few weeks ago, we saw Elon and Queens in North Carolina merge. There's a very, there's a shifting, a lot of changes in higher ed. I think probably the recent legislation, make some changes to the student loan program that like probably will put some additional pressures on colleges as students won't have as easy access to student loans from the government. Um, I'm just kind of curious, like what is this from your vantage point? Like, what does this look like? Maybe, in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I know you have some younger kids. I guess that's another way of thinking about it. Like, how are you? How are you thinking about this for them?
Yeah, this is definitely something, probably at least once a week I kind of think about, like, what is the world going to be like in even 5 years with the pace of change in AI, especially, and how is that going to affect my daughter's education? Um, I'm very excited about kind of a proliferation of new models being tested of education, both at the K-12 level, but hopefully, at the post-secondary level as well. And you have a lot of activity at the state level with ESA programs and different kind of services, education services popping up. AI tutoring seems like a very big thing that is not going to go away. um, when I try to just like wrestle with all of this uncertainty about, something in my case with my daughter that's going to be, 16 or 17 years from now before she's considering college, I think the through line that helps keep me sane is, in our country, you're definitely always going to have education related services and experiences and kind of more career oriented um, services and experiences that will require that you have saved something or can come up with a way to pay for them. And so you're better off kind of future proofing your own family by saving something in a vehicle that is flexible, like a 529, and has been shown to become more and more flexible as the market shifts and changes. Um, I'm excited to have my daughter have an AI tutor on the side that can help her, fill in all the gaps. I remember back in high school, if I didn't understand something that the teacher said, you're kind of like screwed. I mean, you go home, you try to like figure it out in the textbook. Back then, I guess we had the internet, so you could do some rudimentary research to try to fill in the gaps. Now, with like any of the AI tutoring or kind of general LLM products out there, it's the easiest way to plug holes if you feel you've missed some key step. And like, math is a great example where if you miss any step, it's all very cumulative. Then, you mix one axiom, the whole kind of, the whole beautiful structure breaks down and you can't make any progress. Like I look at what Alpha School, it's gotten a lot of attention recently for their model of like 2 hours of sort of adaptive learning experience per day. And then the rest of the day is creative endeavors where you're out there learning, kind of just acting and navigating the world and being prepared for the world. I think models like that are going to become more and more popular. And I think versions of it will be embedded in, hopefully in public school systems as well over time. And what does it all lead to? I don't think colleges are going away. I think you may have fewer of them. I think they may be a little bit more specialized, kind of like for not every single student in the same way that we've kind of marketed it over the last few decades. Perhaps there are more trade school kind of professional kind of paths that become more and more popular, but those two are going to cost money. And I mean, the other theme through all this is ROI. And are you spending, your savings or your scholarship dollars or taking on prudent, debt to be able to get some kind of educational experience or degree, certificate, whatever it is that's going to help you move forward through your life in a productive, positive way. I think everyone's going to be more conscious of the ROI going forward. I hope it doesn't get so crazy that you don't kind of still think of college as this exploratory period where you get to really take whatever interests you and expand your horizons and get in touch with our roots as a culture, as a society, have some of that humanities education kind of grounding you, which I think incidentally is going to be more important in an age of AI, where the AI is going to be doing a lot of the hard stuff for us. Um, but even you know even assuming we preserve that, which I hope we do, I think we're still going to be wanting to think about the ROI in a clearer way than we have in the past.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting vision. And yeah, just emphasizing the ROI. I think one of my thoughts is around, I think undergraduate, I think, will continue to be important. I think for graduate school there'll be a lot more scrutiny. Just with I think there's been it's harder to get data around ROI for a lot of graduate programs. I think they have really been cash cows for a lot of institutions. I think that probably will be, that is going to shift in the next few years, just as graduate lending becomes restricted. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations like going on about that. I think that on the graduate front, I think that probably is like, unfortunate for students in the next like year who probably have to like make decisions quickly, but probably a net positive for society, just to put some extra pressures in schools to either prove the ROI or bring down costs. Maybe certain programs can be reimagined and shorter types of ways where they're more kind of like certificate types of programs. But yeah, I think it'll be really fascinating to see just what the future holds for us. I'm also a former college counselor, and I really struggle to think about like what that will look like.
What to tell people right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah. Right, and then just like
Yeah.
in my own home, like thinking about for we have a 7-month-old, just like what that's going to look like for her. I think it's kind of hard to imagine. I think it will still be important to learn, and I also agreed with you on the humanities and communication and be able to work with others. I think there'll be even more of a premium placed on that. Um, well, this has been such a great conversation, Jordan. I guess as we wrap up, I'm curious where people can find you. I'd love to plug that in the show notes. Um, so
Yeah, it's pretty simple. My email is jordan@backer.com if anyone wants to reach out. I'm on X, I guess Twitter X, Jordan G. Lee. But yeah, I'd love to connect with people. And, if anyone wants to check out, savingforcollege.com to try to, shorten the decision process for a 529, or go with like the sort of tech forward version at backer.com to get up and running really quick with a social finance kind of motivated version of the 529 savings experience. Yeah, you can reach me through either of those as well.
awesome. Well, thanks so much for the time, Jordan. This is, yeah, I think a lot of great information for students and especially for parents and families who are, thinking about how to get ahead in this process of saving for college. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Office Hours with Will Geiger. If you're a student or parent, don't forget to check out app.scholarships360.org, where you can sign up for our free scholarship matching platform. For colleges, we've got solutions to make your work easier, which you can check out at connect.scholarships360.org. And one last thing, if you or someone you know would make a great guest on the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me by email or on LinkedIn. Until next time, thanks again for listening.